everyone, and welcome to another episode of Music of Today's World. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce my next Taiwanese American composer spotlight, Dr. Zheng-Hui. Zheng-Hui has many talents. As a composer, pianist, and poet, she presents music with imagination and spirituality, as well as subtlety and sophistication. She has written music for orchestra, chorus, and chamber music for both Western and Asian instruments. Zheng-Hui's contemporary art music integrates sound, time, color, and poetry. Her works has been presented in prestigious music festivals all around the world, including ISCM World Music Days, Shamus Taipei International New Music Festival, and Taiwan Contemporary Sizhu Music Festival. She's also received commissions from League of American Orchestra's Women Composers Reading and Commissioning Project, from Taipei Chamber Singers, as well as grants from the Taipei Department of Cultural Affairs and the Taiwan National and Arts Foundation. Her most current projects include The Rising Water with the Astralis Duo, as well as a commissioned work for the Muller Chamber Choir, which will premiere in December. To learn more about Zheng-Hui and her incredible works, please visit her website in the description below. When did you start composing, and what or who were your early passions and influences?
I started playing and improvising on my piano since I was little, but way back I never thought about that composition might become my career. I came from a regular middle-class family. None of my family or relatives was an artist or a musician. Although I was learning music, my childhood school didn't allow me to be creative. I was not allowed to write poetry or music, to draw, or to do anything off topics at school. That was just a couple of years right after Taiwan ended dictatorship, when the school teachers still didn't want us to be different and individual. However, I still had been secretly writing small piano pieces and arranging piano accompaniment. Writing music was a kind of way I can express the unheard myself and create my own little world where I feel free and safe. Later, I switched to composition major once I got to know that could be an option. And regarding my early passions, I would say Chopin. I became a huge fan of him since I was in the kindergarten way back before I first time listened to any other kind of music. And of course, I don't write my music in 19th century style, but I think there's certain kind of poetic nature and lyricism that's kind of similar, even though I'm more into subtle colors.
What do you usually start with when composing?
To me, I would say my attitude and my perspective might be more similar to writing poems. I wrote a lot of poems when I was in my 20s. I have a handy grid notebook which I collect my ideas and plans. A lot of them could be general ideas, inspirations, or whatever. I write down things in words before I forget and to digest later. When I start a composition project, I list out all the details including deadline, performer if it's a commission, instrumentation, duration, and then meditate on what to do with the piece. I also sketch out a lot of things on my notebook, such as structural plans, poetic meanings, orchestration, and fragmental materials. One of the most crucial things for me to do when starting a new work is to find out where and how I insert myself into the piece. This can include how I can relate my emotion to the object or materials, or how I may refine or reinterpret certain ideas to build the personal connection to the piece.
Given the history of America, the question of what is the American sound often creates controversy. What do you consider is the American sound today?
I'd say multiple voices that present freedom and diversity. From my understanding, America is a rather modern country with diverse people, cultures, and many schools of practice. It's like a garden with various kinds of plants and blossoms that says, in my opinion, the American sound shouldn't be represented what's authentic or standard or follow a single origin of tradition. The American sound today should be more bold, more diverse, and has the potential of insight to see through different problems and the potential to transcend each origin of culture. In Asia, we usually talk about tradition, following the historical practice, even though the tradition may have some limits or some boundaries that you cannot cross. But once you get to America and look back into your cultural tradition together with other contemporaries, you are viewing from a larger both inside and outside perspectives. That's what I mentioned, the potential to see through more and speak out more.
As a Taiwanese American, do you feel the need to express both culture and ethnic identity in your composition? How has the two cultures influenced your sound?
I don't think there's a need to express my cultural or ethnic identity in my music, especially if I'm only expressing to emphasize it. To me, I feel almost vulgar to do it. Because first, I believe a good artistic work will speak itself. You may find more depth once you look deep into my culture, but you don't necessarily need to understand my culture to appreciate my music. I don't need to emphasize my ethnic identity to catch your attraction or meet certain expectation. Second, Taiwan geographically is a multicultural island which consists of many different indigenous people, different periods of historical immigrants, mostly from China, and also influenced after the colonial period. If we are representing Taiwan, our culture should be also open and diverse. To talk about the cultural influence on me, I actually grew up also surrounded by Chinese instruments. My mom, my sister, and my cousin all played it. I'm quite familiar with those musical languages already. And I was very interested in literature, particularly poetry, both Chinese classical and modern poetry. I would say my Asian cultural origin mostly reflects in my aesthetics, but I cannot say how Taiwanese they are. However, I believe this cultural and personal insert has integrated with the way I treat structure, orchestration, tuning, and the internal relations, and so on.
Relationship between music and other forms of art such as painting, cinema, video art, and electronics has become increasingly important. How do you see this relationship yourself, and how far do you feel does music relate to other senses than hearing alone?
I actually have synesthesia, therefore sensing or hearing other things hasn't been new to me. I guess that's probably also why I was very into poetry, because in the poem, you can see the time, many different colors, sense the temperature, light, auras, smells, motions, objects, and insert your emotions and expressions. This is a perfect analogy for me to relate to music. I don't hear music just as the musical component itself. I have seen quite a bit contemporary interdisciplinary works combining with video or interactive components that can be great if you consider the two art forms' relation is parallel instead of something both or in between. This would be also something I dream to do sometime in the future if there's a chance to realize all my synesthetic imaginations all at once.
The role of the composer has always been subject to change. For example, the world is looking at global warming, Black Lives Matter movement, the COVID-19 pandemic, Muslim ban in India, and much more other events that is happening in today. What's your view on the task of composers today, and how do you try to meet these goals in your work?
I'm not quite sure how my role being a composer may or may not change under these circumstances because I don't write music to serve any function or occasion. I believe most of other composers are similar. We all write from our own will, and we can choose our ways to speak out, to express, to reflect, to show our empathy, and to insert ourselves in the time. To me, I feel lucky to have freedom to create artworks, while in some countries, people struggle to just survive or are restrained their voices. On the other hand, I believe that art need to carry something that transcends time. If my work only concentrates on a specific event or situation, afterwards, once this is all over, what will remain? Therefore, from my viewpoint, it's important to be aware of what's going on both in the field and in the world, and find my own role to insert my perspective into my works. Eventually, I would like to bring my temporary reflection to a universal level, which we can still somewhat relate after years, even after whatever happening today become forgotten. That would be my goals.
Anything else you would like to share in regards to your identity, your sound, your aspiration for music, and for the future?
I'd like to share a brief story that I was engaged into about cultural identity and sound. That was 8 or 9 years ago when I was still a doctoral student. I received a commission from a choir in Taiwan. Their artistic director asked me, "Can you try to write something that represents East or Oriental sound?" I can totally understand how this question comes from, because that's what an international level ensemble would like to represent. We're not just a regular Western choir. Although that was also a very challenging task for me at that age. It's also a good question to ask at all time. What represents an Eastern or Oriental sound, and what is and represents my identity? I personally have no interest to appropriate anything in my music, but I guess usually people are expecting some element. Anyway, I couldn't write anything that convinces the audience there's something until another 4 or 5 years afterwards when I wrote for another ensemble, and I still don't call it a solution. But I think this kind of identity and sound needs a long term of practice to internalize, including critical study and a deep practice of one's culture. And that's what I aim to do for the future.
thank you for watching today. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button so you stay up to date for all future videos on my channel. And again, if you want to learn more about Chen-Hui, please visit her website in the description below. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.